Hi guys, it's Max here from Vanguard Kaiser, and today I want to share with you my Knight of Fury Agravain deck profile. Agravain is probably the best build of golds at the minute in Standard, and that's for a number of reasons. The main reason is that it just completely overpowers your opponent when you play against them. It does so many attacks every turn that actually it's very hard for most decks to keep up their hand advantage against this deck. Probably has a better matchup against protect decks than force decks, but even so, force decks are going to have difficulty keeping up with the tempo of this deck. So let's get into the deck profile, and then I'm sure you can tell me your thoughts on the deck in the comments below. So we're going to start off with our grade 3s, and of course, with it being an Agravain deck, we are playing 4 copies of the Knight of Fury Agravain. So this guy has an Excel gift marker, and he is 12k. His skills are, when he attacks, you can counterblast 1 and put all of your rear guards into your soul. Then you look at the same number of cards that you put into your soul from the top of your deck, and you can call any number of those to rear guard, and then you shuffle your deck. His second ability is Soul Blast 12, and then until the end of the fight, your opponent can only call normal units. So no more triggers to guard with, no more triggers to throw into the back row to use as boosters, or to chuck into an Excel circle to get a cheeky attack off. So this guy is really, really strong, and probably more so because of his first ability than his second. Although his second ability seems absolutely devastating, and it is, because of how many attacks you get off from your first skill, you're actually probably going to kill your opponent before they get the chance to have to lose out on their triggers. So I'd say actually, kind of your second turn of being on grade 3, third turn at the latest, your opponent should be dead, because this guy attacks so much. He'll be getting 10 attacks off per turn normally with his skill, so he is absolutely crazy. So that's our Knight of Fury Agravain. Next we move on to another grade 3 we run, and it is Sagramore. Now we run Sagramore because he is a great card for making sure you can call units to the field before your Agravain attacks and fill out your board while not losing cards from your hand. So his skill is Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. When placed from hand, Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and then call a card from your hand to Rearguard. This helps you make sure you've got the units on the field that you want to have. The only downside to Sagramore is that he can't use his skill when Superior called off Agravain, because it's a from hand skill only. But actually, the benefit you get from Sagramore, he's a +1 every single time you place him from hand, is good enough to run him. So we run 3 of him because we really want to avoid riding him as a Vanguard. But on Rearguard, he's amazing because he helps you fill out columns. And because he's 12k, on an Excel 2 circle, he's attacking for 17k. On an Excel 1, he's attacking for 22. So he becomes a great beat stick just on his own. So that's our Sagramore. Next, we move on to our grade 2s. And our first grade 2 we run is my favourite card in the deck. And it's this card. It's our Liberator of the Flute, Escrad. There isn't Liberator support in Standard, but it's nice to have this to call back to the old Liberator archetype. His skill is, when he's placed, if you have a Knight of Fury Agravain or an Escrad on your Vanguard circle, you look at the top card of your deck and you call it to Rearguard circle. So you get a +1 straight away off of him. And then you can counterblast 1 and you can have this unit gain 5k if you like to the end of the turn. The second part of the skill I don't tend to use that often, but this guy's really good for helping you either rush down your opponent on turn 2. If your opponent's on grade 1, and you've gone first, and then you ride into this, you've got the benefit of calling the majority of your deck, which is going to have to either drag a card out of their hand or take an extra damage for them. It can be especially fun if you end up calling something like your Sagramore, because Sagramore is just so big on his own anyway. So this guy's really nice for filling out your field. And one of the benefits of this guy compared to Sagramore is that his skill works when he's placed off deck. So if you have, say, 7 cards revealed and you've got a few triggers in there that you'd rather keep in your deck, this guy's going to help you with that, because you can not call the trigger, call him, and then he will fill out that spot that you've avoided calling your trigger from. So a really nice card to help you fill out your board. And that's our Escrad. Next, we run another card which focuses on Superior Calling. Of course, that's the theme of the deck. And that's our Advance of Black Chains Paladin. Now, his skill is when placed, counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand. You look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you call one of those cards from among it to rearguard. Then, if you have a Hoel on your Vanguard or rearguard circle, you draw a card. So, if you have the other piece of this combo, then you're +1ing off his skill. If you don't, then it's fine, because you're still being able to cycle a card you don't want in your hand for potentially something you'd rather have on the field from the top 3 cards of your deck. So this guy, again, really nice for Superior Calling. And I mean, that's pretty much all to say about him. You know, the aim of this deck is to get as many big attacks at your opponent as possible. So by having cards like Kaladin and Eskrad, which are helping you select the cards you want from your deck, especially when you're blind picking, say, 7 cards off the top of your deck from Agravain, it's helping you make sure that you've got a really strong field still to be able to punch your opponent as many times as you can and get their hand down as quickly as possible. One of the cards which benefits from all the calling that this deck does is our next grade 2. It's our Knight of Hard Work, Alior. Now, this card's skill is that when he attacks, you get to perform skills based on the number of cards you've called. Now, if you're calling 7 cards at a turn, it means that you're getting either of these skills off, or you can pick depending on your circumstances. The first skill is when he attacks, he gains 5k if you've called 2 or more units. And then the second skill works in conjunction with that if you want to get a really big attack off. Say your opponent's got some triggers and you've been quite unlucky with your drive checks, and that's when you've got 4 or more cards called, you can have it gain 15k. And then at the end of that battle, it goes into Soul. So say you call this onto an Excel circle, we'll say Excel 1 just for the sake of argument. He's 19k, and then because you've called other units, he gains 5 first, so putting him to 24, then 10, so he becomes a 34k column just on the Excel circle on his own. So he's hitting for lots of damage and hopefully forcing a perfect guard out of your opponent's hand. The nice thing about the 34k that he's on is that for, say, a Force player who's on 13k, or an Excel or Protect player, dropping a heal trigger out of hand to guard this isn't going to be enough. So it's always going to try and get at least 2 cards out of hand if they've not received any triggers. So a really nice, strong card. Next, we move on to our grade 1s, and we have a first card which we run 4 of, which has got a very similar skill to our grade 2 we've just looked at. And that's this one. It's the Knight of Sound Health. This guy's skill is when he boosts, he gains the ability, just like how the Knight of Hard Work gains it when it attacks. So this one says, when it boosts, if your Vanguard is Agravain, you perform all the effects below according to the number of rear guards you call this turn. So the first skill is, if you called 2 or more units, the boosted unit gains 3k. If you called 4 or more, the unit gains 5k. So if you've called that 4 or more units, then this becomes a 16k booster on its own. Which is very nice if it's with one of your 12k grade 3s, because that makes it a 36k, just check my maths right, yep, 38k, 28k attacker, 38k if it's getting 10k from anything else. So what that means is that you're getting over the magic numbers for your opponent's guards. So say you've got Agravain and this, it's 20k on its own, but thanks to the 8k boost, it's 28k. So you're getting a really nice number off of that, which is hopefully going to make your opponent lose even more cards from their hand. So again, a really nice skill. So that's our first grade 1. Our second grade 1 is our second combo piece that goes with Kaladin, and it's this one. It's our Stronghold of the Black Chains Hoel. So this card says, when another unit in the same column as this unit is placed, this unit gains 5k. If Kaladin is on your Vanguard or rearguard circle, it gains 10k instead of 5k. So this guy's also making your big numbers for you. The really nice benefit of this is that it's a continuous ability, not an auto, which means that, say, I call, for the sake of argument, you probably won't do this, but say I call this to the front row, or to the back row, you know, for that sake. And then I call this afterwards. Because this is a continuous ability, this card's skill will still go off and still activate because this unit was called this turn, even though this unit wasn't on the field when this unit was called. So that's another really nice thing about this deck, that it doesn't rely on a when placed skill. It's a if that card was called that turn. So that's why we run that card. Next, we move on to our final place set in grade 1s before we move on to the last card we have. And that's our Little Battle of Tron. Little Battletron's first skill is when placed, Counterblast 1 and gains 5k till the end of the turn. You can choose to use this if you want. I tend to find that I go without most of the time, just because counterblasts are really important for keeping this deck's momentum going. And the last thing you want to happen is for you to run out on a turn when you're going to get your multiple attacks off with Agravain. So I don't tend to give this guy 5k. But his second ability is really good during the early game. And that is that when he hits, if your Vanguard's grade is less or the same as it's been errated as your opponent's, you look at the top card of your deck and call it to rearguard. What that means is you're either getting a +1 when this unit hits, or you're forcing your opponent to guard an attack, which is probably they're more than happy to take early on in the game normally. It'd be very nice if you could force out a 15k guard when attacking with this on rearguard against your opponent's grade 1, just to drag things out that they might need later on. So we run this mainly to pull cards out of our opponent's hand, and if they're stupid enough to let it hit, to top deck something probably much bigger than this. So that's why we run our little Battletron. Our last grade 1 is our Knight of Vitality, Brennus. Now this guy we only run 2 of, but I do think he's really good. His skill is when a grade 3 Vanguard is placed, you can put him into your soul and draw a card, and then you get to call the card from your hand to rearguard. So he's just helping you get through your deck, help you get your combo pieces you need, helping you make sure you've got the best feel possible without costing you too much, since he draws you a card as well. So that's why we run him. Next we move on to our starter. We run Springbee's Messenger. We could run the Ezel starter if we wanted, just to mess with our opponent's head, but I like the art of this guy. His skill is when rode upon, you draw a card. Next we go into our triggers, probably the place where there's the most space for how you want to change your build. And we play rainbow triggers in this deck. We play 4 crits, 4 fronts, 4 draws, and 4 heals. The reason we do this is because it's likely when we've already attacked our opponent 5 times that they've either got 1 or 2 triggers in their damage zone from their damage, from the attacks we've done. So we need to run quite a high number of fronts to ensure that even if our opponent has got lucky with their triggers, we're getting as many attacks off as possible. That's helped by our Excel circles, which give 5k and 10k boosts, both of which are pretty viable in this deck. You can go either way. Force 2 is especially good because it helps you get into your combo pieces easier, but we need to run front triggers to ensure that our attacks hit and that our opponent has to guard them. We also still need to run crits because we want to make sure that our opponent isn't no guarding until 5 damage, and we need to make sure that the threat of crit triggers are still a threat to them, so we're dragging out cards from their hand in the early game too. So that's the build. I really enjoy it. I think it's the best gold build in the game at the minute. I'd say Ezel is a very close second. There'll be an Ezel deck profile coming out soon. Please do tell me what you think. I'm definitely not an expert, so I'm always happy to hear feedback and hear your suggestions on the deck. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please subscribe to see our next deck profile. See you later, guys.